Welcome back to Red 5 Scale Models. Last time out, I mentioned I was going to build this for the kit off for CHUF. That's running soon. It's a charity competition. I'll not go into too much detail. You can check, there's a link just there if you want to check out a bit more, or perhaps even enter. It's running until the 31st of May. But the gist is basically, got to get a kit for less than £20 and make it out the box. No added kind of resin parts, no photo etch or anything like that. Just as intended, really, out of the box. It's a fun competition. It's to raise money for a local heart charity that I'm really supportive for, to me and my family, when my daughter was poorly when she was first born, and to the Freeman hospital in Newcastle that basically saved her life. Anyway, less of that. Let's move straight on into the kit. It's a lovely little kit. I chose it was a bit more quirky and off the wall. I've opened some of the bags because this isn't really an unboxing. It's as it is. There's a closed canopy. It's a bit of a shame, but as an added bonus, it comes with canopy masking. So that's an added bonus. Nice set of decals, as Tamiya tend to always have. I think I'm going to go for the RAF Burma type camo rather than the Netherlands, mainly just because there's a lot more going on with the RAF, and it's got some cool dragons on the side of it. And who doesn't like a nice dragon? Instruction wise, it's Tamiya, incredibly straightforward, not many parts, nice and easy kit. I'll try and do it some justice, unlike the Sea Harrier, but immediately looking at it, it looks far better. It's got some nice panel lines, not too many parts, it's nice and straightforward, and I'm hopefully going to use a riveting tool and create some riveting on there, make it a bit more interesting, some nice panel fading, nice bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Weathering with some hairspray to create some chips where the pilots are getting in and out. And speaking of pilots, he's actually half decent. I'm going for that one. That one's a bit crap, but this guy here should be nice to paint. He's got a nice bit of detail in his face and his features and things, so that should be quite good. They've already got the seatbelts painted on. I mean, normally what I would do is either buy aftermarket or try and make some with some masking tape, but stick with that. And last but not least, sprue. It's got the undercarriage. It's just a sprue. A couple of bombs there, tiny little things. I feel, looking at this, I feel sorry for the poor souls that had to go up against zeros and things like that in the early parts of the war. It's somewhat suicidal, but let's give it a go. So the building of the cockpit was pretty straightforward, only a few parts, and because I'm not using any sort of photo etch or anything like that, it was an absolute doddle. So I'm basically hitting it with a coat of like a green-yellow chromite, and then I've put more yellow into the green mix to make it lighter, and I'm putting some panel fading on there. And then basically just going through the motions of painting in the instruments, black gloss where need be, or semi-black gloss where need be, putting things like dials and buttons, just basically highlights and little bits of extra detail in there, and then finishing off that part with a coat of Agrax Earthshade from the Citadel range, just to add some kind of highlights and lowlights and shadows. And then once that's nice and dry, I go back in just with a white aluminium on a very, very fine tip 000 brush and just paint in a few scratches and things like that, just to give it a bit more life, really. But you're not going to see much of it because it is a closed canopy anyway, so it's just for the eagle-eyed people who want to kind of peer right into the cockpit. It's not particularly accurate, or I'm just kind of winging it as I go. everything went together pretty well, except the bit behind the canopy, which was an absolute pain in the backside. Had to put tons and tons of filler on that just to try and get it remotely smooth. But after what felt like an eternity of sanding and filling and sanding and filling, I eventually got there, and it was alright in the end. Now, I didn't get too much footage of this because all hell was breaking loose in the house with the two kids screaming and shouting at each other. But basically, I printed a guide off the internet and then followed it as best I could with a straight edge and a lead pencil, just drawing in some lines. And then after that, I just run a riveting tool over them quite lightly. You've got to kind of be almost top down when you're doing the riveting tool, hence why you just see my fringe in my head and don't see a great deal. And I'll probably have to do a video on this separately when I get a bit more accustomed to it, because it's probably, I think, the second or third lot of riveting I've ever done. But it turned out alright in the end. You can't really see much of it, but in certain lights it does kind of emphasise the rivets there on the panels and makes it pop a little. So I've just put down a black Vallejo primer, and then once that's nice and dry, I'm going over it with any kind of like a juddery, shaky action, very close at a very low air pressure, with a pure brilliant white, going in each individual little panel, each individual panel line, and also where we've run the riveting tool over, I'm trying to go in as close as I can into all those little boxes and things, so that when you put the next base coat on, the colour will really come through and show some panels. Then I'm hitting it with aluminium, but only really in the high tread areas, because this is where we're going to do some really big chipping, but also dated chipping, older chipping, things that would have been there a while, and then the grime and dirt of use would have built up over the top of them, so they won't be popping out bright aluminium. But once that's nice and dry, give it a good coat of a clear coat, and then once that's all dry, get some cheap crap hairspray and just lightly mist it over. I would advise putting a piece of kitchen roll down so it doesn't get all gunky on your board. So I've basically just been blocking in the flat earth there. I tend to do a lot of my camo schemes freehand. I just prefer the end result, to be honest. But you can use something like a blue tack or a putty or a masking tape. Very lightly over the areas, just blocking out the colour, trying to keep a little bit of that post shading or pre-shading there. And then what I've done is I've added a really dark brown into the original brown flat earth mix, and I'm going over all the major panels, all the bits that they would use to get at the ammunition, flaps and things, not going into where the riveting in that is. Don't worry if you go a bit too heavy, because you can fix that. Then I've got the original base flat earth again, and I've added some deck tan to it. and I'm basically very, very low pressure, and like I did on top of the black originally with the white, I'm just going back over all the little bits and bobs, all the little areas where the riveting is, but I'm applying a bit more pressure in certain areas, but a little bit less in others, trying to keep the larger panels themselves with the same amount of pressures. And then as you build it up, you kind of get different kind of feel to it in a different kind of panel fading. And then areas that are more raised higher to the top, giving them a bit of a thicker cover. And then just to unify the whole thing back together, I'm giving it a light dust of the original base flat earth, just to kind of tie down or tone down a lot of the darker, more pronounced lines. So I basically repeated the process but for the green, but this time I used dark green, but I added some yellow into the original base mix because I always find dark green quite dark, and again blocked it in, filled it in, very, very basic. Tried to keep a little bit of the black and white post shading coming through as much as I could, and then with a dark green and an even darker green added to that, I can't remember the colours now, went over again the darker panel lines and the gaps and the recesses, and then lightened the original mix again with more yellow, did a first initial pass, and then thought I could go lighter again, so I added yet more yellow. The yellow tends to give it a bit of a warmer feel, and it looks a bit more sun bleached than just adding a white. You can use a deck tan for this as well, but I find the yellow, personally, I prefer the yellow. And then once I've done all that, spinning it around there, but luckily I haven't done the bottom, I do the same process on the bottom with the sky, and this is a 50-50 split. On the bottom, half is black, half is the sky. Again, just light misted coats, and then I add a bit white to this one, just to kind of get those panel fading going on. So yeah, pretty straightforward. So what you're going to do now is, once the paint's nice and dry and still matte, no base coats or anything on it, take some nice clean water and just kind of put it on the area that you want it to start chipping, and then let it work its magic and kind of soften up the hairspray underneath, and then very gently with a soft brush start just rubbing it away. You can use like a cocktail stick if you want, but areas where there's going to be high traffic, these are kind of old scratches and old wear over time, not new fresh bright aluminium. Be careful, because if you do go too hard, you can go all the way through to the base plastic or chip bloody great chunks off like I've just done there. So I'm just sticking a couple of coats of Mr. Hobby Super Gloss on there now. Couple of decent coats, giving them a good time to dry in between each one, and then for the last coat, just a little tiny drop of the Mr. Hobby and mostly thinners, just to get the gloss kind of sheen out there, and then just let it dry and go nice and set and hard. And then it's just standard decal process, microset, microsol, nothing much to it really. Give a little bit of microset down, put the decal down, and then let it dry, and then microsol the hell out of it. As many coats as you think you need until it kind of conforms to all the panel lines. The Dragon had a white background first, which was a little bit tough to line up, but nothing too major. Basically snapped its head off. I got it straight in the end, and then that was it really for the decals. They were alright. They weren't too bad. And then I've got this master batch of kind of brown, black, oil paints, bit of navy blue, God knows what in there. It's kind of a mix that I've made over the last couple of months that kind of suits all things armour and aircraft. And I just sludge it on relatively thick, don't worry about where it's going, and then once it's all nice and dry, wipe it off, and you'll find that it's kind of in all the panel lines in and all the rivet lines and all sorts. And if you find it's a little bit too stubborn, tiny bit of thinners on the cloth will help it along. But otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. So here I'm just putting some AK weather and grime streaks on, relatively thick, and because of the gloss surface they're not going to kind of adhere to the paint job. And then when they're nice and dry, going back over it with a clean brush with some clean white spirits on it, very, very, very gently, very little spirits on the brush, and just help blend those streaks in so that they're really, really quite faint, just to give an idea of kind of use and of age and of dirt, kind of dirt and grime. So then I started applying a dot filter. Basically I just put some oil paints that were kind of right for the scheme, so yellows, browns, greens. Put them on a piece of paper just to let the wick all the oil out so that they weren't quite as runny. Dot them about in areas that you think kind of work, greens on greens and yellows and things like that. Leave them for about 20 minutes or so just to dry a little bit. I mean, oils take bloody ages to dry anyway. And then, as I did with the last lot of streaks, just kind of wipe them off very gently with a soft brush and tiny little bit of white spirit. Again, it's just adding to those layers, adding to that kind of weathering and aging of the plane. It's probably also worth noting that in between each one of these coats I've just put a quick layer of gloss down just to protect the coat before it, because obviously what you don't want to do is wipe the last layer off. And then right at the end of this, once this has been applied, hit it with a coat of matte varnish, just so it's got a nice flat surface, because then I go in with some AK weathering pencils, and again, very similar to the dot filter process, it's just building up those layers, but these are a little bit more defined colour areas, so that you kind of get that idea of that there's been airflow over the wings, adding things like rust and stuff to it as well in areas. And on this occasion, same type of brush, but with just plain water, tap water. They're absolutely great, the weathering pencils, really nice to use and really easy to get off if you cock up. So then I'm just finishing up with a few chips. Go to town if you want to make it look really banged up. Just a 000 brush and some white aluminium, very gently, very small, concentrating in areas that'll be pretty banged up, areas around gun ports and stuff like that. A little bit of fuel stains, and then just the final assembly. So that's it done. It's a really, really nice little kit. It's pretty straightforward. I had a bit of an issue with the cockpit in that there was some sort of leak, and when I was I don't know at what stage it happened, but some horrible brown sludgy liquid kind of leaked into it, and I had to basically take it off, clean it all, rebuff it, and in doing so kind of knocked the paint from the outside off a little bit when I was handling it and trying to get it back in, and the fit's not great because the excess paint and glue and God knows what else. So that was a bit of a backside on the canopy front, but it's for charity, it's a bit of fun. It's for a really great cause. As of now, and beginning of May, we've managed to raise about £1,500, which is just phenomenal. There's some really great builders, some really great modelers taking part as well. So if you want to find out more, follow me at Red5Models on Twitter, and there's a link to the Just Giving site, and all the information's linked to my bio. It's called Kit Off for CHUF. It's a local children's hospital here in the northeast. They've been an absolute godsend. They along with the Freeman Hospital, basically saved my daughter's life. I owe them. I can't express how much I owe them. So yeah. Thanks again for listening. I hope I've helped at least one person out there. And as always, give me a follow and subscribe to the channel. Bye bye.